Hello, all, and welcome to a new episode of the Horror Countdown podcast. I'm your host, Don and Ellie, and tonight I have a special guest with me. I have Caitlin Marceau.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on board. I really appreciate it. So, for tonight's list, we have decided to choose our favorite actresses slash final girls.
Yes.
So, you said this was a topic that was pretty familiar and near and dear to you. Little elaboration for our listeners.
Yeah, of course. I'm a horror author, and I tend to write a lot of material that centers around, feminist issues with like female protagonists. And women's studies is actually an area of interest of mine that I went into in university. So I have like, I'm so invested in it. And of course, the horror genre is my favorite of all of them. And not long ago, I actually wrote a giant list for Tilt magazine about iconic women in horror. So this is just definitely a topic that's near and dear to my heart.
Mm, nice. All right. This is going to be a fun one because I mean, at least on my end, I kind of mixed it up a little. I mean, I have a lot of actresses in general, but there's also a couple final girl performances in here. So, yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
So,
I'm excited.
all right, so let's start out. Let's get our number 10.
Sure. So for me, it's actually Thomasin from The Witch. It's a 2015 film. Robert Eggers directed it. And Thomasin, she's just the coolest character to me. Even though she doesn't seem to have like a crazy amount of lines, um, she's just so. If you haven't seen The Witch, essentially she is this young woman. Sorry, I should mention she's played by Anna Taylor Joy. Excuse me. And essentially, it's in the Puritan times, and she's with a really strict religious family. So strict, in fact, that despite the fact that they're Puritans, they're essentially exiled from their town, right? And they kind of go into the middle of nowhere to start life anew. And I just thought it was such an interesting film and just such an interesting character, getting to see this girl try to not only wrestle with the life that is expected for her, including, essentially child rearing her, her siblings and having to be super obedient to her parents, in particular her father. And then finding out that, her mother doesn't really like her and they're all kind of looking to send her away to work elsewhere. Um, she just has her entire life dictated to her. So, I don't, if you haven't seen the movie, spoiler alert, obviously, but towards the end of the film, essentially everyone in her life has perished and she finds herself alone after being accused of witchcraft and, being in league with the devil this whole time. And at the end of the movie, she actually does sign Satan's book to become a witch. She is essentially embracing what they all feared her to be. And it's just so great because you get to see her evolution from this, questioning young woman to someone who's finally able to kind of take control of her future and her destiny and make this choice for herself, even if it's the counterintuitive one. So I'm over the moon. I love that movie so much. And Thomason is very much my, one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's a fantastic one. I really really enjoy it as well. If I was a little bit higher on the film, I probably would have put her on there just because for me, I find that she doesn't really do much in the film until the third act, when a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff just kind of, she starts reacting to everything going on around her. So I think that kind of downplays her for me a little, just because she just kind of acts as window dressing until the third act, when everything that's been built up just kind of pushes her to finally start, embracing the journey. But in terms of what you're saying, I do enjoy it. I do think it's a fantastic role, and I've become a fan of hers over the years. So I do appreciate a lot what you said. Just like I said, if I thought higher of the character, I probably might have put her on my honorable mentions. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and she's
it's
definitely a character where things happen to her as opposed to her being
yeah,
more like
yeah. She's
having
not.
the agency.
Yeah, she's not, a driving factor in the storyline. She's just more of a neutral observer until, like you said, the third act, when, her family's, everything starts forcing her into action. But
Yeah. I see, this is the thing for me. I feel like her character is quite passive throughout. I definitely don't
Right?
disagree that she lacks the agency, but what I thought was, for me anyways, again, this is just
Yeah, no
purely,
worries.
from my perspective. A lot of women at that time didn't have agency, Like, I think
Right.
it would
Yeah.
have, for me, been so much weirder if she was this, like, let's get it, guys, kind of,
Yeah, if she was if she was a
yeah.
little bit more of like a if she was like a little bit more of like an outspoken vocalizer, it may have looked a little odd.
Yeah, it
So
would have
yeah,
definitely felt out of, like, time and place for her.
yeah,
So I think the fact that she even, like, to me, the big moment isn't so much that she has a lack of agency throughout, because, like, she doesn't do all that much over the course of it. I mean, she disobeys her father. She does kind of take charge with her brother. They go through the woods. She is at the center of the drama. But to me, what I find is almost like a reclamation of her agency is the fact that, like, everyone is telling her to be afraid of witches and to be afraid of Satan, and they're a very God-fearing household. So to me, there was agency and courage in her taking that choice to essentially embrace everything her family had been afraid of and everything she had been told to reject as a means of, like, making her own future. But she definitely is more of, like, a passive character compared to some of the other final girls out there.
yeah. Like I said, it's kind of a weird one where being we're keeping it period accurate kind of takes her agency out of it compared to a lot of others. So it's not really a fault of her. It's more just the fault of the time period itself. But
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, it's still a great choice. Yeah. For my number 10, I kind of went a little offbeat with some of my choices. I think you'll probably find that as we go on with the list. So, my first one, I went this one just basically for inclusion, just to make sure the name is out there and make sure people realize the legacy and importance of it. I went Fay Ray as Andero in King Kong.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So yeah, I would say this is easily like the first final girl or scream queen, what you would want, whatever term you want to use.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, this is still it's still a fantastic performance because you realize this is 1933. You don't have the final girl role set anywhere yet. This is like a prototype. So you still have everybody trying to save her, but the fact is that she's still the first person that you can really look at in the genre and say she was a legitimate scream queen because she stood up and what she played the role with Kong. She's up there, she's taken captive, and she doesn't turn into the shrieking violet. She stands up to him, and she doesn't really necessarily like go toe to toe and like be as vocal as the character was in the 76 version, or as playful as the version in the 2006 version. But still the fact is that she went with Kong and she stayed with him and she survived. So I realize it's not necessarily like a great performance, but I think just necessarily in terms of being like historical and everything, just keeping the name out there and mentioning it, I think that's pretty much something that deserves mention, especially on a list like this.
Oh, totally. No, that's a good choice.
Yeah. All right. So that moves us to our number 9.
So mine, actually, did you want to go? Do you want to do number 9? And swap back
Oh,
and forth?
okay. Yeah.
Mix it
That's
up.
great. Yeah. All
Confuse
right. Yeah.
everyone.
Well, all right. So then my number 9 would be Countess Mircalla, Ingrid Pitt in The Vampire Lovers.
Oh, that's such a good choice.
I know. I'm a huge fan of that movie. It's one of my favorite, if not maybe my favorite Hammer film, and I'm a huge fan of them in general. But I absolutely just love the way that Ingrid Pitt plays this role. Stately, composed. She has that Victorian air to her, but then she's also got that mischievous side. She's also somebody that you can't just take your eyes off of her, for a second, not just because of her physical appearance, but she's got that mysterious side that she's gonna just slit your throat anytime she gets the
Yeah.
chance to.
And she would too.
Exactly. And I mean, it's such a fantastic role, and the fun that she has just playing tricks on that entire family and just wiping them out from underneath them. you know, Stealing every single one of the family members, all of the female family members, stealing every single one of them, laughing about it, and then, throwing it in the men's face. I absolutely love the way that she does that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's one of my, like I said, it's one of, if not my favorite Hammer films of all time. So being such a huge fan of that film as I am, I definitely had to include her in this one. So yeah, this one was an easy choice to make the list.
Yeah, I know that's a great choice actually.
All right, so we'll move on to number 8. You're number 9.
Yeah, oh yeah. So kind of keeping in not a similar vein in thematically, but kind of going off that family tangent. I actually have Grace Ladomas, Samara Weaving from 2019's Ready or Not. Um,
Mm.
I love that movie so much. Like it has to be one of my favorite movies of all time. I mean, in fairness, I'm also a painfully big fan of Samara Weaving. So for me, it was quite an easy choice to put on the list. Um, but I think the thing that I really like the most about it and the most about her character in particular and I like that she's essentially resisting the pressures of this new family, right? She, like, her entire journey isn't just surviving, but it's essentially rebelling against and rejecting assimilation into this new family. She's not just going along with things. She really is kind of fighting tooth and nail for her own survival. And unlike some of the other movies where you have, in terms of like, your killer or your antagonist, this is an entire family that's out to get her. It's very much a full unit that she should be embracing and welcoming and wanting to be a part of. You have all these other horror movies out there where, you'll do anything for the family. They'll die for their families. And she's not so keen on any of that. She's really rejecting it. Um, which I think is a really interesting kind of or not contradiction, but um, juxtaposition, given how badly she wants a family. Like the only reason she's getting married in this movie is because of how much she's wanted a family her whole life, because she didn't really have one growing up. So I found that rejection of it was really interesting. I'm also obsessed with her using her wedding dress as like a weapon and tool for survival, and using like the wedding dress and that wedding imagery again as that rejection of family, whereas normally it's kind of classically used as a symbol of being accepted into one, right? So I'm just weirdly obsessed with this movie.
Yeah, me too, because she's on my list.
Oh,
Yeah,
there we go.
a lot of the same thing, a lot of those same things that you brought up are part of the thing for me. Is it? I think this is probably one of, if not the best modern Final Girls because,
So good.
yeah, I mean, not only is she having to outwit, more than one person, the fact that she's doing it in such an unconventional way where she's not necessarily fighting back, but more just necessarily doing what she can to survive. Like
But
she's
that's it.
literally, yeah, she's, like you said, she's using, her wedding dress to tie holes in her hands or to, rappel downstairs or, you know, changing out of her wedding shoes into high top sneakers because she can't run around in heels.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't want to really say too much because she's on my list, but yeah, I love that movie. I'm a huge fan of that as well. So
Oh, so good. So
it
good.
it's such a fun time. I'm a huge fan of that one. So
Yeah. I was tempted to move her up in my list and then I kept her at 9 and then oh man, I yeah. Anyways, she was my number 9.
yeah. So if we're yes, since we're going back and forth, let's move to your number 8.
So, okay, so this might be slightly controversial because I realize that some of the names that are going to come before, my number 8, people might not necessarily agree with. But coming in at 8 for me is Nev Campbell as Sydney Prescott. Um,
Mhm.
I think she's just an incredible final girl. I think she's an incredible protagonist. I haven't seen the newest Scream, tragically. Our theaters aren't open here right now, unfortunately. So it's been killer.
Yeah.
But I've heard good things. I'm hoping she holds up in the newest one. But no, she's phenomenal. Like she's in all of the movies and in all, in all the ones I've seen anyways. She's just been so strong-willed. She doesn't back down. She calls each killer out on, their bullshit, really. She's not, I think, unlike some movies, right, where, you hear the villain in the basement and the lights aren't working and they go and check it out, by themselves. She's a lot more cautious. She still isn't backing down from these challenges, and she's certainly meeting her aggressors head on, but I think she does it really intelligently. Um, you also get to see, I find most clearly with her character compared to some of the other final girls, we get to explore the trauma she's been through, right? I think it's in, I want to say it's the third one, but it could be the fourth one, where essentially we find out she takes phone calls and she deals with women who have been in trauma. I think that's the third
Uh,
one actually.
yeah.
Yeah. And then I think she writes a book in the fourth also about her experiences and talks about trauma and moving, past this.
Yeah, that's the plot of the fourth one. That's why she
Yeah.
returns, because that's
Yeah.
part. It's on her book tour. Yeah, I think that's how it goes.
Perfect. Yeah. Because I was like, I know one of them has the book. I thought that was four. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure three is where we talk about her, and working on this phone line. Um, but even in the second one, she has lived through the horror of, this first scream and the ordeal she's been through. And in the second one, she has call display. She's like, somebody prank calls her at the beginning, following the release of Stab, the movie, right? And, she answers the call, she can trace it. She's like, it's a federal crime to prank call. And she's very on the ball with this stuff. Um, but I just think it's great to finally have a final girl who's not only facing these villains head on, but is, you know, canonically, in the universe dealing with her trauma. She's not just, she didn't just survive it and she's fine and she can move on with her life. She's dealt with it. And it's very good, very much going to be something she deals with forever. And she's strong enough to face that challenge head on and continue dealing with it, and take that experience and transform it into something positive and useful for other women who are going through maybe not the same thing she's gone through, but trauma all the same. So she definitely makes my list.
Yeah, same. Again, this is another one on my list actually.
There we go.
So yeah, so Sydney's on my list as well. Uh, yeah, I'll explain a little bit more when I get there. So for me, my number eight, again, like I said, I kind of went a little unconventional with this one. So this one is actually an actress more than an actual role,
Mhm.
but I went with a European actress by the name of Edwidge Fenech.
Oh, yeah, I haven't heard of her.
Okay, well, she is basically considered the queen of the giallo.
Okay.
So she's basically, if you find a giallo movie with her in it, it's considered like one of the top tier stuff.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so for those that don't know, giallos would be spiritual ancestors to slasher films. The same setup, killers running around killing people, and then there's a mystery about who's doing it.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. So like they're like the precursors to slashers. They're like the next. They're like the step before slashers. So if you think of slashers as like 74, 75 with like Black Christmas, Texas Chainsaw, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Giallos would be late 60s, early 70s. So they're like just before. They're kind of like right on the borderline. A lot of people tend to get the two. Um, they overlap just because of like the time frame and stuff, but that's essentially it's as close as I can get, just briefly going through it. I mean, I can do a whole spiel on giallos, but um for Edwidge, the thing for me is that one, I think she's the best actress in the genre. She there's several films, especially one called All the Colors of the Dark, which I really recommend that movie. I love it. She plays a mother who lost her child in a car accident, and she's trying to recuperate from the trauma. Her husband's trying to get her to, he's doing what he can to support her, but he's also caught between, okay, it's long enough. Let's try to move on and live our lives. And honey, I can't be here for work. I can't be here. I've got to go to work. So he's kind of like caught between those two things, and it's not helping her any much. So she ends up turning to a neighbor who lives nearby that introduces her to a satanic cult.
Oh,
And
as all good neighbors do.
yeah, so the neighbor introduces her to into a satanic cult, and let's just say things go crazy from there. There's say pagan rituals. There's all kinds of you know ceremonies and rituals and stuff like that. But then there's also this strange killer running around knocking off people in her life.
Oh,
So yeah, it's a really fun movie. I really recommend it, and she does a fantastic job in that role. I mean, the thing is, you have to remember this is an Italian film, so she's dubbed. So you have to, you can't just go off of the voice. You have to go off the
yeah.
performance. And yeah, it's fantastic. She runs, the gamut from, being sensitive and crying to, being hysterical and like be supportive, like I need your help. Why are you leaving me? And she's vulnerable. She's, stalked by this strange killer. She's got, whether or not this friend is actually trying to help her or not, why did she bring me to this cult, and she's not trying to kill me, and am I going to be the next sacrifice and stuff like that. It's a really really fun role. She had a couple of others. I don't know where the majority of these would be easy to find. I think you'd probably have to just pick up like Blu-rays or versions like that. But if you can find films, other films of hers would be The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward, which is another really fun movie. That's another big one that she has like a different role in that one where you're kind of unsure whether or not she's on the killer side or not.
Oh, I love that ambiguity so much.
Yeah. And then she's also in a film called it goes by several different titles, and I don't want to butcher it. I think it's Those Strange Drops of Blood on Jennifer's Dress.
Okay.
Yeah, there's like three or four different titles. It depends on which version you see, because that one there's like several different cuts to it, so it kind of has like alternate titles.
Okay, okay.
Um, oh, okay. Another one would be The Case of the Bloody Iris. So
Okay.
if you can find it, I think those are another one. And then the big one is Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key.
Oh, I love
That's
that title.
yeah, that's actually one title. That's just the title of one movie.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
gonna have some like hunting to do, I think.
yeah. She did a couple of others. Those are like the easy ones that you can find, or I mean, easy, and I'm saying you have to go out and hunt for
Yeah.
Blu-rays. But yeah, those are like her
Easy
big.
comparatively.
Yeah, essentially. But yeah, I'm a big fan of her work. Like I said, she's a fantastic actress. She's in a lot of these, and they're like the top tier stuff. So yeah, I went with an actress for mine. So that was my number 8. My number 7 is Sydney. So
Ah, nice. I
yeah,
like the reversal there.
yeah, my number 7 is Sydney, and a lot of what you were saying about the fact that her character is not just a one film. It's not just a one film role. There's actually evolution. What she does. You
Yeah.
go. You see her. As the you see the teen Sydney, you see the early 20s Sydney, you see the 30s Sydney in part 4, and then now in the new one, I'm not going to
Yeah.
spoil anything here, but there's like a 40s Sydney, and there's an evolution. There's like a gradual change that because all these other films are one and done. You don't really get much of a chance to actually see evolution. So I think that's a pretty unique facet that not a lot of others have the opportunity to do,
Yeah.
and she pulls it off marvelously. Even in the 30s version of Sydney, she still goes toe to toe with the teens. And I mean, yeah, it's probably because they're teens and she's an adult, but we'll let that slide. But still,
Hey, people's knees start hurting when you're 30.
yeah,
The teens have dexterity on her. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. but yeah, I think the fact that there's an evolution and you can gradually see how it's affected her, of going from the person that hasn't had the chance to leave her house in 2 years to a person that's finally enough at ease to go on a nationwide book tour, and you know what she does in the fifth one. I'm not gonna again, keeping the
Yeah.
spoilers, but
Like blocking my ears. La la la.
yeah, like I said, evolution I think is a big thing with this one, and that's one of the main reasons why she stands out. Not and then you have good films on top of it. So
Yeah. And it's great to see like a character that actually has character growth and development through those main stages of her life. Like, I could talk about Sydney Prescott all day.
yeah, I'm a big fan of hers. A lot of what she does is really, I definitely can see a lot of the appeal with her. So yeah, I had to put her on my list for that reason.
Totally fair.
All right, so I think that moves us to your number seven.
It does, yeah. So we sort of swapped. You had an actress last time and I had Sydney Prescott, and this time you have Sydney Prescott and I have an actress.
Oh,
Yeah. So this is one of the ones that I think is going to be like, quote unquote more controversial in terms of like a pick for my list. But I actually have Shelley Duvall's Wendy Torrance,
hmm.
which I think everyone, I feel, or no, I don't think, I feel like a lot of people tend to hate her pretty profusely in The Shining. They, even Stephen King, like, didn't like her in The Shining. I think his quote was like, she's just there to scream and be stupid. I think is exactly how he phrased it about her when the BBC interviewed him. So like there's been a lot of hatred for this woman, for this, or this woman's depiction of this character. um the reason I chose Shelley Duvall specifically as Wendy in terms of my number seven is because that woman went through absolute abuse and just like torment during the filming of this. Like I think everyone's aware of like 127 times that she had to do, like I think it was her swinging the bat at Nicholson when he was on the set. Did
Yeah,
he
yeah. I
over?
think it's when. Yeah,
Yep.
I think it's the scene where he's taunting her up the stairs
Yeah.
out of the out of that room where he's. Um,
Yeah.
uh, I
Give
think
me the
it's that.
bat.
Yeah, I think it's that sequence there.
Yeah. It was like 127 times that he made her do this. She like had all kinds of like issues like sore hands, her voice was hoarse. Um she ended up being like really severely dehydrated during the filming. She was sincerely crying and panicked a lot of the time because of how she was being treated on set. And then what people said about her after the filming of this, it got so bad too on set that like allegedly, according to people who looked into this, she started losing her hair during the filming of this movie. And I don't want to say it necessarily derailed her career, but it certainly dampened her enthusiasm from continuing filming so soon after, right? And she went through a lot, and the fact that she still persevered and pushed through and was just trying to keep her shit together during the filming of this movie, um, I feel like that really mirrors Wendy's journey too. Like she's just trying to keep things together. She's surrounded by these like aggressive, well, in this case, an aggressive man, her husband. She's just trying to keep her son safe. She's just trying to do the best she can with what she's been given. And she hasn't been given a lot. Um, and I think the fact that she pushes through and perseveres and essentially overcomes the situation by the end of the film, both Wendy and, Shelley Duvall, I think is really impressive. I think it also says a lot about the way women, not necessarily just, way back when they were filming The Shining, but like even now, the way a lot of actresses are treated in filming, the way a lot of, women are taken advantage of for the sake of art, art and artistic direction. And the fact that she was able to kind of weather the storm and get through to the other side, I think is a testament to her and her strength as a person, as an actress, as just a human being. And it always kind of upsets me that people still kind of, talk smack about Shelley Duvall as Wendy, but she tried, I think, her best given the situation. Um, she also had, like, again, allegedly, according to reports and people who knew her and had seen, previous versions of the script, she allegedly had quite a bit of dialogue and character growth in the movie version, and like her lines just kept being cut. So, she didn't start out as this woman who was, as King said, supposed to be stupid and cry, but that's certainly how the director turned her into. And that's kind of how she was framed. And I think just given the odds that were stacked against her, she more than did her job phenomenally well. So yeah, she's my 7 on this.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard for me to rank it just because one, I'm not a huge fan of The Shining.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not like a huge fan of the film in general, so it's not like I'm really like attached to her. But even when I was like, even before I really knew like what was really going on, like back in the early days when I first I just watched it just because it was a film to watch. Like I didn't know anything about it. It was really kind of hard to like attach to her just because she was somebody that just seemed like window dressing, like she didn't do much.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me it's hard to kind of really rank her, but I don't have any issues with the choice. I mean, she's fine for what she is. It's just yeah, like I said, I have my own um own personal issues with the film.
Yeah, I'm not like a diehard fan of The Shining. I know there are some people out there who would like throw themselves in front of a bus before disavowing that movie. Um, I'm certainly not one of them. I don't have any like strong feelings about the film. I don't dislike it, but it's
Yeah,
definitely not like in my top 20 favorite like horror films of all time.
yeah, that's kind of the way I am. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can probably without even thinking about it name like 9 or 10. I mean, I can even name like 9 or 10 Stephen King adaptations that I like more in The Shining. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
definitely not the biggest fan of the movie, but I think for some reason just hearing everything that Shelley Duvall had gone through made me a big
yeah,
fan of
that
her in that movie.
yeah, that does help, and it's one of. I mean, I have kind of lightened my stance on it a lot just because I've heard a lot of what went on filming it, but it's
Yeah.
still one of those where it's kind of like it's hard for me to like really add much more to the film than where I stand on it. So yeah, great choice. So we'll move on to number 5, right?
6, I think.
Oh, 6. My bad. Sorry,
It's
6.
all good. So my 6 is kind of a tie, I guess. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that or if I'm like breaking rules on this one. Um, but I'm a huge fan of Jules and Dana from The Cabin in the Woods.
Hmm,
Dana, I think, is played by Kristen Connolly, and Jules is Anna Hutchinson. I couldn't decide which one I liked more, so I'm kind of grouping them together on this one. I hope that's okay.
that's fine. I have no worries. Yeah.
All right. Phew. If I had to pick maybe Jules, but she's not really a final girl. Like she does, she ends up dying in the movie. Um, but I thought the two of them were so I kind of well no, I guess I'll in horror, there's a lot of talk, right, about not even just in horror, just in general, there's a lot of, horror virgin dichotomy, right, in literature, in media. Um, in this movie, they're literally phrased, right? They're literally poised as, the quote unquote virgin and the quote unquote whore. With Jules being, the horror and Dana the virgin, even though Dana just had an affair with her teacher and Jules is in a, long-term relationship with her boyfriend, right? Um, I think there's something to be said about the way society sees women. And I just kind of liked how this film subverted those expectations, played with those characters. I mean, Jules is a really intelligent woman. It takes her essentially being chemically treated to be a quote unquote dumb blonde to essentially disarm her in this movie. I think she's in pre-med, if memory serves me right. So she's really intelligent. She's there for her friends. She provides comfort to her friend Dana after, the affair she's having with her teacher goes south and he breaks up with her. Um, so yeah, I think she's a phenomenal character just for as long as she's in the movie. Dana, on the other hand, I think she's great in the sense that she has the strength, kind of like all the final girls, right, to push through and make it to the end. Um, but in this one, she essentially decides that the world is over and she, helps Marty kind of bring it to a stop. She's not, at first she is willing to kill her friend to survive. And then she sort of thinks twice about that. And she's okay with the fact that, Marty lives and everyone sees their very abrupt and sudden ending. Um, but no, but I was especially, fond of that kind of, again, horror virgin dichotomy that they set up and explore. Especially since that's something that I think is really looked at in horror. I mean, it's the foundation of the final girl, right? Like she's usually the virgin, she's usually more chaste. It's all of her, quote unquote promiscuous friends who get the axe first. Um, so yeah, yeah, that's my number six. That's my tie.
Nice. I probably include them if I was a little more familiar with Cabin in the Woods. I've maybe seen it once or twice.
So
So
good, so good.
I really like it. It's just I always have a hard time, like, for some reason I never really feel the need to go back to it for some reason. So I've only seen it a couple of times. So maybe if I had a little bit more attachment to it, maybe I'd see that. But
That's fair.
mm, yeah. So for me, I'm on number five. I'm actually going to do a little spoiler alert here. Both of these are actresses. My five and my four, they're both actresses. For my five, I went with my favorite modern actress. I'm a huge fan of her. I love a lot of what she does. I went with Tiffany Shepis.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, a lot of her films are more on the indie side. So a lot of her stuff is basically, she's like a lot of it in the like underground kind of like indie stuff. But I'm a huge fan of what she does. She's usually the spunky, sassy one that throws down just as hard as the men. She usually lasts quite a ways into the film. She usually handles it quite valiantly. She, puts up a fight, and that it really means a lot when a lot of the films that she was in are basically just, yeah, there are excuses to get her, in various states of, you know, I'll just say it, she's naked a lot, but the fact is that even when she still puts up a fight and she still throws down a lot with the men and she still takes it to them.
Yeah.
And to me, I really appreciate that. Not just being like the shrieking Violet, just standing in the corner covering herself as the killer kills her, but
Yeah.
even if she doesn't have a shirt on or anything, she still like takes it to them like that. She's still willing to try to save herself in any way she can, and I mean, it's appreciated. It's a nice change of pace. And, the fact that she's committed to the genre as she is, she's probably got well over 100 titles.
That's impressive.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, they're like on the indie side, so she's not as mainstream. She's not going to have like, the starring role in a Hollywood film, but the fact that she still appears pretty frequently, the longevity, she appeared in like the early 2000s in a couple of films, and she's still working to this day. So,
That's pretty
yeah.
good. That's a
Yeah.
legacy right there.
That's like I said, that's one of the main reasons for why I picked her. My other actress, like I said, I kind of went a little off the beaten wall with this. So for my number four, I went with
I think we're still on number five, though, aren't we?
no, that was five. That was
Oh,
Tiffany was five.
I think you skipped your six then.
No, my six was Sid because I went Fay Ray, Ingrid Pitt, Edwidge, and then Sid.
So weird. Okay.
So yeah, I'm on number four. My number four is Barbara Steele.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So yeah, I'm a huge fan of her work. She's basically in a couple of films from the mid '60s. Again, a lot of Italian work. Um, but my favorite role of hers is easily Black Sunday. She plays a dual role in that film. She plays the virginal princess and she plays the angry witch. And real quickly, the plot of that one is, a witch is sentenced to death hundreds of years ago,
Oh
and
yeah. I know this
yeah,
one.
yeah. She's reincarnated in the present day and begins stalking the family of the people that killed her, using the daughter of one of them, who's a spitting image, which it should be because it's played by Barbara Steele, using her as a vessel to carry out her destruction. And so this is it's the '60s, gothic horror kind of stuff. A lot of people crawling around in tombs and all that kind of stuff. But the fact that she played both roles, she played the good girl and she played the evil witch,
Yeah.
and she did that very in several other films as well. She played dual roles in a film called The Ghost. She played dual roles in a film called Nightmare Castle. And I believe she also did one in a film called my memory's blanking on me. I think it was called Terror Creatures from the Grave or something like that. I'm not sure, but she had like a small window of films in like the early '60s where she was like the gothic horror go-to, dual role kind of a person.
Yeah.
And a lot of yeah, she played a couple of others. She also played alongside Vincent Price in one of the Corman films.
Oh, okay,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, so a lot of the films that he did with Roger Corman in the early '60s, those Poe adaptations, Pit and the Pendulum, that was the one. Yeah,
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
yeah, she has a role in that one. So great, body of work. One of the first ones that I remember. I remember getting into the genre because of her. So I had to make my list. So my number four.
That is very
Or number,
valid.
yeah,
um, so yeah, so my number four is Rosemary Woodhouse from Rosemary's Baby. I absolutely so I think it's played by Mia Farrow, if memory serves me right. Um, and I think there's a lot to be said about her character. Again, it's interesting too because I find a lot of we look at a lot of final girls, a lot of women in horror as we kind of talked about it earlier with Thomason, but as these like really active characters. Um, and then there are some that are like more passive, like Thomason, right? And I find, personally speaking, I find Rosemary from Rosemary's Baby a really interesting combination of like being a really active character but also passive, right? Like this, again, trigger warning for anyone who's sensitive to it, but essentially she's sexually assaulted, right? She thinks she's having sex with her husband and it turns out to be, the devil, Satan himself. And then she gets pregnant with his child. And the whole thing is a setup by her husband and the people in her apartment building who are part of this cult, essentially. And there's trauma in that, right? There's like something really horrifying, really upsetting about the fact that she's carrying something else's baby, and against her consent at that. So she is kind of, she is a victim to this trauma. For part of it, she is almost like, I don't want to say she's passive because that doesn't feel fair to her. She does, try to look into things, but things kind of do just sort of happen to her, right?
yeah,
And the more it happens, the more she starts, getting these feelings and trusting her intuition and really fighting against um, what's happened to her. Uh, so even though it's not one of those like classic sort of final girl situations, right? Like she's alive at the end, her her baby's alive at the end. Um, I think there is something to be said about like her challenging the status quo, challenging like what's been ordained for her. I think there's a lot to be said about the bonds of motherhood because she does eventually want a child, not necessarily under these circumstances, but
right,
she does want to be a mother. And I think there's just like a lot to dissect when it comes to that. I think also too, like I kind of mentioned earlier, sort of with Thomason, but I think we look at final girls and women in horror as necessarily having to run around with chainsaws and fight back, and a lot of them do, and that's fantastic. Um, but I think that a final girl, or just an iconic. Again, I'm saying final girl, but any version of woman in
right,
horror, right? I think there's something to be said about handling it more subtly, of not necessarily just surviving the killer, but surviving the trauma that comes along with it. What her character goes through is horrifying. Just when she thinks she's out, just when she thinks she's gotten help from her doctor, he sends her back to her family, like her husband and these villains at that apartment complex. She's medically gaslit. She's forced to be with people that she wants nothing to do with. Her body becomes not her own, right? And I think there's a lot to sort of be interpreted from that. um, and I like the fact that we're looking at this iconic woman in horror who her trauma that she overcomes is pregnancy and motherhood, and of course, sexual assault as well. That's a definite big one. Um, but she does get through all of this. She does make it out the other side. Now, what that means for her character in the long run, we don't know, right? Because it kind of ends with her seeing her kid for the first time after, I believe she thinks he's died. He didn't survive birth, but she does, come face to face with her son and is concerned about his eyes, and it kind of leaves us in this cliffhanger of, what is, how is she going to really deal with all of this? Um, you know, she obviously wants to be a mother. She's happy to be there for him. She does kind of have this moment of like bonding with her kid, even though I think she was originally going to kill it, right? She has like the knife and
Yeah.
everything. Um, but I just like this idea of, her big final girl moment is just surviving the trauma and moving forward in her life. Big question mark as to what that means, however.
Yeah. I mean, I have her on my honorable mentions. I think it's a great turn about it, just because it's a perversion of one of the most sacred things that a woman can go through. She's a mother. She's literally giving birth, and she's carrying on the human race. But is she really doing it with who she thinks she's doing it with? Like, that's the whole thing. And the paranoia that develops, the way that, like you say, that she's being gaslit, the way that she's trying to fight back against what's being thrust upon her through every means possible, except at knife point. Like, they're literally doing everything they can to make sure that it happens. And I mean, they're literally killing to make sure it happens. The fact that she's unsure of herself, trying to survive through a situation like that, yeah, that's a that's a big thing. And
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of that one as well. Did you mention number 5?
Uh, so yeah, that's what I was wondering before. I think like we skipped through one of them.
Yeah, because
um,
I think you missed your number 5.
yeah, it's very possible. Yeah. So my number five was Adelaide Wilson and Red, from Us. Uh, I absolutely love that movie. There's so much to be
Mm.
said about it. Jordan Peele is just fantastic, right?
Yeah.
Um, but Lupita Nyong'o's Adelaide and Red, I thought, again, it's the same actress, two characters, right?
Right, yeah.
um, but I find there's something really interesting about, what it is to be us and our place in the world and discovering that. And both of them they kind of tie in a way to Rosemary, in the sense that it is kind of family based. It's, at least in her case, in Adelaide and Red, they're both protecting their families in very different ways, right? Adelaide has had her family by choice. She wants to be where she is. She's chosen this life for herself. She's made these circumstances for herself, going so far as to take, the other Adelaide's place, right? Because Adelaide isn't really Adelaide. We find out,
Right, yeah.
she's the original Red. Um, so I think there's something to be said about that, compared to Red, where she is, in this case, a victim of circumstance. She's at the wrong place at the wrong time, and now she has this life that she didn't necessarily want, with children that she didn't necessarily elect to have, and a husband that she didn't really pick, and this life that isn't her own, um, but that once was. And it's just, I thought there's such an interesting juxtaposition between the two characters. And Lupita Nyong'o is just like just a phenomenal actress. I feel like you can't go wrong with her if you have her in any movie. So
Yeah.
I just, yeah, those are my two for
Yeah,
five.
yeah, that's a fantastic choice. Like I said, if this is kind of like one of those where I'm kind of like with Cabin in the Woods, where if I was a little bit more familiar with the film, because I've only seen it maybe once. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I absolutely agree. I love what she did in that. She's fantastic in what she does. Yeah, like you said, the fact that there's a switch where we figure out who are we really following, and like you said, how that plays into the life choices that they've made. I think it's a really intriguing way that they do it, and I love the way that it plays out. I love how once we realize what's really going on and how all of the various conflicts are coming together. um I really wish I had been a little bit more familiar with it, but yeah, I can definitely easily see this as making my list if I was a little bit more familiar with it. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, especially if we're talking like how good they are as it, and how good the performance is. Because if it is, I would easily say that that would have easily made my top five, even just based
Yeah.
on
She's
just
so
based
good.
exactly. If we're just basing it based on like how good of a performance it is, yeah, this is an easy top five for me. So
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
she's like a masterclass in acting, that woman. Like just
yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah. Yeah. If I really wish I've seen this one a little bit more. Yeah, fantastic choice. Okay, so that moves us to my number four, and my number four is Grace from Ready or Not.
Oh, yeah, there it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, that's my number four. Like I said, a lot of what goes on in here is just it's such a fun deconstruction of like the normal final girl. Using her surroundings to put up a fight, using her, trying to survive against more than one. That movie is just amazing. I absolutely love that movie. It was easily one of my favorites of that year. So yeah,
It's so good. You can't go wrong with that movie.
yeah, yeah. That movie is just so much fun. I absolutely love it.
So good.
So that moves to my number three, and I went with Jenny from Friday Part Two.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, I love this. This is probably, I would say, my favorite of the franchise. So I'm a huge Friday fan in general. But the one thing I love about this one, and this is the first one that, even though a lot of the other Final Girls that went up against Jason did this as well, but she was the first one that I saw that actually was smart about how she approached Jason. First, one of the things is that during the chase, she's actually intelligent enough to trick him several times. She ducks behind rocks, she ducks behind trees, she ducks behind various bushes, and she hides, and you know Jason passes by, or doesn't even notice, and he has to double back and try to find her. It's a tactic a lot of them have done since, but the way that she does it here is it's really effective, and I like the way that she does it, especially when you consider that she's still drunk at the time because she was out
Yeah.
partying. Because she's out partying, so yeah, she's drunk for a lot of it. But for me, the whole thing in is the finale, the final confrontation, where the fact that she has, within, I would say, maybe 20 seconds, the wherewithal to look at the shack, look at everything that is going on around her, the severed head, the body parts, the candles, everything that's going on, the wherewithal to look at that scene, grab the sweater, put it on, and imitate his mother.
Yeah.
That is next level kind of psychology. I wouldn't have had any idea what to do in a situation like that. I would have looked at that scene and I would have probably pissed myself.
Oh yeah. I'd be very dead.
Yeah, I would have just looked at that and I would have just been, oh God, I'm never getting out of. I would have looked at that and I would have just given up and said, yeah, I'm a part of this force for the rest of my life.
Yeah, you win.
Yeah, and
Tap out at this point.
yeah, like yeah, like that's just tap out. Like, yeah, I'm not surviving. The
Yeah, I
fact
know.
that Yeah, and the fact that she doesn't, she thinks about the sweater, she looks at it, puts it on, and then imitates the mother and gets away with it. Like, she actually gets him down on his knees and is about ready to deliver the final blow. Like, the fact that she actually got away with it, for the most part. I mean, yeah, she still has to fight him off a little at the end, but the fact that she actually put up not just a fair fight, but actually got the better of him and had to think of that on her feet in the moment while drunk. Yeah, she's one of my all-time favorites, and yeah, I love what she did, and I'm a huge fan. So she's always been, I would say, my favorite. I do give it a little, like I said, I do knock it a little just because a lot of what they did later on, she is repeated, so it's not like it's a unique thing she does, but she's still one of my favorites, and it's one of the big reasons why I'm such a huge fan of that one. So
Totally fair. No, it's definitely a good one.
yeah. Cool. So I think that moves to your number three.
It does, yeah. So I chose. So okay, I feel bad that it's not like second or first, but like please bear with me when I say like I love this character and this actress just so much. So like it pains me to not have her in my top spot. But my third would have to be Laurie Strode. Um,
Mm,
just I love her so much. Jamie Lee Curtis is incredible. She's just a phenomenal actress. Again, I think she's like a great person from everything I've ever seen about her. And her depiction of Laurie Strode, I think, is just so great. I feel like she's one of the most iconic final girls. You know, I want to say one of the original Scream queens, if not the original Scream, Scream queen. Um, she's just great, and I feel like one of the things I like about her is she does go toe to toe with Michael several times across the franchise, right? It's not like again, it's not like a one and done. Like she really does have these moments um, where she does kind of go up against him. Um, I also like though that she is wrestling again, kind of like oh my goodness, like Sydney Prescott, she's still dealing with this trauma, right? There's always going to be this trauma that she's encountered, that she's lived through. Um, I have very mixed feelings about the newer Halloween movies to have come out.
yeah,
Um, they're they're fine. They're
it's okay. You
movies.
can. It's okay. You can say it. I'm not a fan of those either.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest. I mean, like they were fun. Like they're fun to watch in like a mindless way.
Yeah,
They're certainly not as good as the original, right?
yeah.
I don't think anything will really ever compare to it. But I did like seeing her character older, right? I think she's in her like early 60s, I want to say.
Yeah, she
Um,
would. She would probably have to be at least somewhere around Jamie's actual age, like late 50s, early 60s.
that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, like they definitely. I don't want to say they aged her up, but they didn't do her any favors by giving her like the long gray hair. I feel
Oh,
like they
I
kind
think
of.
that was. I think I don't know if that was actually given to her. I think that was just she showed up as. I don't know. I wasn't the hairdresser on set, so that.
No,
So
but still, but like
yeah,
I'm sure she had it. I feel like I don't know. I feel like they did nothing to make her look younger. So like I thought she was in her early 60s. She could be her late 50s, but
yeah.
like it was nice to see her at that point in her life and how she never like I mean I was sad to see that she never moved on, but I thought it was interesting to see how she was just like ready for him. Like you see a lot of final girls who are like, wow, this camp has been haunted by, the ghost of a kid who died. I'm sure they won't come and kill us tonight. Whereas she's like, no, he's still alive and he's coming back for me because it's Halloween and I've learned. She's like, I'm ready for this. And she's like prepared and she tries to drill it into her daughter and granddaughter's head. Like they have to be ready. They have to be prepared for this because it's just going to happen one day. I think they might have gone a little bit over the top with it for her in the newer installments. Um, Again, I'm not the biggest fan of the newer movies, but I did like getting to see that evolution. And I'm just again a huge fan of her in the original Halloween. So Laurie Strode is definitely in my top three.
Yeah, she. I mean, I got two choices left, and she's one of them. So
There we go. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll save my piece for mine. So
sure.
all right. Number two,
Two.
one. Yeah, number two.
Is it me or you? Sorry.
Your yeah, because we're doing two, going back
Oh
and forth.
yeah. So my second one is Danny Arter. So Florence Pugh from 2019's Midsummer.
Hmm.
Um, I I love this movie. Like everything about this movie is phenomenal to me. Um, there's so much to be said in terms of like cult mentality. There's just a lot to be said about again trauma and kind of overcoming it and everything. Um, but I find Danny especially interesting as an examination of empathy and community and family. I know when the movie came out, there were some people who had a bit of an issue with the fact that she goes from this like traumatic experience with her family, right? The suicide of her sister and the death of her parents at like the same time, horrifying, to then this like cult movie about, I think it's Sweden, I want to say, or Switzerland, just this cult movie, right? But I
Yeah,
think there's a lot to be said about kind of overcoming. what she's been through and what it means to be a family. I think there's a lot to be said, just about the value we put in other people, the respect we want from other people. I mean, she has this terrible boyfriend the whole time. Like he's just the absolute worst person. His name is Christian. I think he's played by Jack Rayner. Um, and he's just a terrible, shitty boyfriend. He forgets her birthday. He shit talks her to his friends. He gaslights her when she's panicking. Like he's just horrible. And I think there's something really interesting in how the way we see ourselves is kind of, I don't want to say it's influenced by the way others treat us, but in this case it can be, right? For some of us, the way others treat us is the way we kind of feel like we deserve to be treated, right? I feel like a lot of people can kind of say that. And it's interesting to see Danny's character go from having this like really abusive treatment from her partner, this really tenuous, stressful relationship with her sister, and then the sudden loss of her family, to the sudden discovery of a community where people essentially pass away on their own terms, where they can empathize with each other, where they think about each other, this sense of community that's there. um, and she goes from someone who is horrified to witness the suicide of two elder citizens of this community, to like actively sending her boyfriend to be burned alive. I feel like there is a real character shift that happens. I think it's a really phenomenal, just masterclass exploration on belonging and family, and what it means to find our place in the world, amongst other things. Again, this movie does a lot of really interesting things. Um, and I'm not like, saying that Danny's necessarily like a girl boss, right? But there's a lot that her character goes through, and I think there's a lot of things that her character explores. Um, and yeah, there's yeah, just Danny Arter is definitely an interesting character to me, and I think she should be in,
Mm.
the top 10.
Yeah, I have an interesting history with Midsommar. I inadvertently saw the director's cut, not knowing it was. I purchased the film and thinking it was just the regular version. So I saw the director's cut and I absolutely hated it.
Oh
So
no.
yeah, one, I'm not a huge 3 hour film person. I really, really, I kind of like tap out at 2.5 hours.
Yeah,
So
fair.
yeah, I really want to go back and revisit it just because I wanted to see like the differences. I haven't had the time to. A lot of it's because I wasn't a huge fan of it, so I haven't really had the time. But
It's really
it,
one of those movies that you love or you hate. I have never heard someone come out and be like, "Yeah, it was just okay." Like it seems
yeah,
like such a polarizing movie.
yeah, I do agree. I like where he takes her. I like the journey. I think she does a fantastic job. It comes off really well. It's just I really wish that I was a bigger fan of the movie, but the yeah, I have an interesting history with Midsommar, so we'll just leave it at that. But
Yeah,
yeah, great choice. But I mean, like I said, just my own personal thing.
of course.
Yeah. So for my final two choices, my number two is Lori.
Nice.
This Yeah, this was a hard one just because it really depends on which timeline we're going off of, and this is
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of one of the weirdest things is that if we're basing this off of 1 and 2, the 78 and 81 version, she's my number one, no questions asked. I love the way that they play her off in those two films, the way that she carries herself, the way that everything about 1 and 2 works for me.
It's amazing. They're so good. They're just so
Right.
good.
One and two are the gold standards. I
Yeah.
absolutely love them. H2O and Resurrection are kind of odd. I the weird thing is that I don't mind H2O, but I really like Resurrection, even though Laurie's not the huge factor in there because she gets killed off at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
But the thing is that even after that point, I actually still really like Resurrection. It's one of my favorites in the franchise. But even still, I really even though she gets killed off at the beginning of Resurrection, I actually enjoy what she did in H2O. I think H2O handled her incredibly well. You know, the fact that she had to, she changed her name, she moved out of state, she, started a brand new identity, but it was still somewhat haunted by it. And yet, when the time came, she knew, it's still her. She still knows how to snap to and defend herself, and she's ready to spring into action. I really like that Lori, and I really wish that they would have taken that kind of an approach with her. Whereas what they do with her in the new ones,
Yeah.
I mean, the crazy lady who lives out in the woods, who's, armed to the teeth and ready for doomsday. It's an okay take. I'm not necessarily sure I agree with it, but it's a take. I'll give it that. Um, Man, Halloween Kills. Where do we go with that one?
Nowhere good.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nowhere good.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that kind of is what dropped her for me.
Yeah, I
Like
get
I
that.
said, yeah. If we're basing this just based off of one and two, I I have no question. This is, slam dunk, hands down, number one. But the fact that especially since, this the 2018 one kills off Halloween 2 and says, no, this is the sequel. And we're supposed to go from 78 to 18 to, Halloween Kills. I don't necessarily like that kind of scenario. I really wanted, 18 to be more of a follow up to 2. I wanted, that to be a better one. But yeah, based on what they do with her, it kind of falls for me just a little.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of why, I put her as number two.
Yeah.
Um,
Like the only reason I was personally okay. So here's my hot take on on her character in like not Halloween Kills, but the 18 Halloween, right?
right,
I feel like there's a lot of and like maybe this is a me thing. I feel there's a lot of movies where we have these male protagonists who are like these action heroes or they're combat vets who come home and it's been 20 years since the war and they still have like polished guns and they're ready to go and they're preparing for the next one. I feel like we have a lot of like really masculine iconic just action males, right, who do this, and I've never seen it done with a woman before. Like even if we're looking at Sydney Prescott, right? She's gone from somebody who's like experienced this trauma, who's been just through hell and back, and she's using her trauma to help others. She's overcome it. I like the fact that Lori took like or they took Lori's character into the opposite, where they were like, she's never gonna overcome this like a normal person. Like she's now a recluse who lives in the middle of nowhere with a trap house, ready to
right, yeah,
drop you into a pit of spikes. It felt a bit excessive, and like I have to admit, like again, I didn't love the newest two. They're certainly not on my favorites list, but I did like the fact that they decided to kind of stray from the expected, like, oh, trauma survivor who's made it. I thought it was interesting to show us someone who like again, she did have a life, right? She has a daughter, she has a granddaughter. So she did in some ways overcome that. She did sort of move forward. Like she did have a life to some extent, but she
right, yeah,
never got past it. So that's my little hot take on it. But like
yeah,
I the first two were the best.
exactly, yeah.
You
I mean,
can't
like,
come back from that.
yeah, I mean, like I said, if this is one and two, it's hands down. But yeah, based on everything that they've done to her since, it kind of sours me just a little. Just enough for me to move my number one choice, Barbara Crampton.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I absolutely I love her. She's fantastic. Even if we were just including like I would have put her on the list if we were just basing it off of her early career, Reanimator and Castle Freak and a couple of the other stuff that she did earlier on. But when she came back and she did You're Next, and she's done a lot of the other stuff recently, like she was in We Are Not Alone, I think was the title of it.
We are still here.
The Ghost movie from like 2015, 2016.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that one there. Starting with that one, she's just done fantastic stuff. especially I would say Jacob's wife, and that's the big thing that kind of wowed me enough to put her on the number one. I absolutely love that movie. I love what they do with it. I love that the way that they portray her character in that. The fact that she initially starts as the housewife that's just there to make sure the husband has everything he needs and puts him first, and she kind of just takes a back seat. But over the course of the film, the fact that the vampirism takes hold, and it allows her to become more independent, and she stands up and fights back, and you know she legitimately has a saying that she puts the marriage on the line and say, are you with me or are you not? And you don't see that she would say that at the beginning of the movie. Like, that's not the type of outburst that she would have if she wouldn't be the vampire. And
Yeah,
it took it took turning her into a monster to give her humanity, and that's a fantastic take that I really enjoy. And she's just absolutely amazing. I can't think of a bad film she ever did, but because of Jacob's wife, she finally moved to my number one. So
that's fair.
yeah,
I'm tying my list out with well, tying my list out. I'm ending my list on Jess Bradford from 1974's Black Christmas by Bob Clark. I I love her so much.
yeah,
she I find so okay, so I have a hard time picking a favorite because I do love her, don't get me wrong, and she is my number one. Um but I like Barb, who I think is I want to say it's Margot Kidder.
yeah, it's
I
Marco Kidder. Yeah,
Yeah, she's also fantastic. So I really struggled to pick one of the two, but just kind of makes it to the end. Um, and she does some really controversial things in the movie too. So she just skyrocketed to the top of my list. To me, she's like the original final girl. She's, I wouldn't really say she's a scream queen. She doesn't really yell as much as, Laurie
yeah,
Strode. But she's definitely to me the iconic, like original final girl. Um, the fact that she not only so like of course she has to survive this killer as her sorority sisters are murdered. Um, what I like about her is that in other movies where they don't necessarily realize their friends are gone or missing, they know from the onset. She's like, something isn't right. My friend didn't leave when she said she was going to leave. She didn't arrive when she said she was going to arrive. Like, something isn't right. She pushes the cops to investigate. She really forces them to, they kind of they're very misogynistic, right? They kind of talk down to her. But she doesn't back off. She still tries to get them to look for her friend. She takes, you know, the well-being of those in her sorority seriously and is an active participant in trying to figure out what's going on. Um, I think the fact that like she stands up to Peter is amazing. So for anybody who hasn't seen the movie, she's pregnant. She tells her boyfriend like, "Hey, I'm pregnant," and he essentially, and I'm quoting, he says, "I'm quitting the conservatory and we're getting married." He's studying to be a musician, and he presents this as like this is the wonderful solution. You can stay home with the baby and be a phenomenal, housewife and mother, and I'll earn our keep for us. And she's insistent. She's like, no, I'm getting an abortion. And he fights her on this, and he's really upset, and he's trying to dictate her future for her, and she's like very headstrong, and she's like, no, I know what's right for my body. I'm making this choice for me. I'm having an abortion. Like, you don't get to decide what I do. And I think it was great seeing her like not only try to go after her sorority sisters, not only standing up to Peter who's trying to dictate her life, but the movie's climax at its end, she thinks it's her boyfriend who's been murdering the sorority sisters, and she has no problem trying to defend herself from him. um and having that big that big sort of showdown. It still does end with that note of ambiguity, right, where she's in bed and she's unconscious, and the cops kind of leave her upstairs, and we sort of see that watchful eye on her. um, so you don't really know at the end of this movie if she'll survive or if the guy that's been in her house this whole time does get her. I like to think she makes it out. I think there was going to be a sequel where she does survive, if memory serves me right. Um, but just Jess Radford. 110%. It's the hill
Yeah.
I'm willing to die on. She is my favorite.
Oh, no worries. I wanted her on the list, but she kind of got bumped off just at the last second for putting Fay Ray on there just because historical significance. But
Yeah,
yeah, if I didn't have any other slots, she's on there for sure. I'm a huge fan of what she does.
so
Uh,
good.
yeah, uh, I mean, being like the first, again, she could be like the first final girl.
Yeah,
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's a fantastic choice.
thank
I
you.
wanted, yeah, I wanted her on the list, but I bumped her off the last second. But if any consolation, she would be number 11 if we went that high. So,
Yeah. I had
so
so many that I desperately wanted to put on this list that I couldn't. Like when I wrote an article, like I mentioned, I wrote like a column for Tell Magazine a while ago that was like iconic women in horror. And like I had to keep it to 16 and I struggled. Like I had like 30 on this list
yeah.
that I like whittled down to 16 and then I had to whittle it down to 10 for tonight. I'm like
Yeah.
stressed out.
Well, great. Do you have any honorable mentions? Just like a couple that you were fighting with, like the final 15 or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, man, I do. I always have some that I struggle with. Um, I guess if I had to just name three that I had really considered but didn't put on like super quick, Carrie White from Carrie.
Hmm.
Um, I was really tempted to put on Mary Mason from American Mary on my list, as well as Bridget Fitzgerald from Ginger Snaps. I was so struggling with those three.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with Carrie. She was on my honorable mentions as well. Um, Again, my other honorable mention, like I said, was Jess from Black Christmas. But the other one that I really wanted, and again, kind of an oddball one, but I really wanted Tree from Happy Death Day.
Oh, she's so good.
And yeah, she's that's fantastic. I love what they did with her in the first two. I'm really looking forward if they finally get a third one there. I want to see what they do with it. I want it to, if I could just rewrite it just real quickly, I would want it to be where she doesn't, she's not the one that has to keep going back in time. It's
Yeah.
somebody else in the group that does it, but she's there to mentor them because
Yeah,
she's
that would have
done
been
it.
nice.
I would want that to happen because I think that would be a fun little way to tie it up where, he has to convince her to keep doing it, and then they have like little reminders to be like, okay, well, this is how you do it, this is what's going on, and so on. But yeah, Tree, I love what they do with her, and I'm a huge fan of those films. So I wanted her on the list, but just because there's only like one or two films, I kind of kept her off. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can definitely see her making the list sometime in the future if they expand the franchise or do more. So
Yeah, that's fair.
yeah. All right. So guess this is the end of the show. So thank you so much for doing this. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Yeah, no problem. Happy to have you on board. So you've mentioned your work a couple of times. So go ahead and let everybody know where they can read it and find out about what's going on with you.
Yeah, so if you're ever looking to follow me on social media, I am pretty much on everything. And my username is very simple. It's just Caitlin Marceau, which is my name. I also have a website, so you can always find me at caitlinmarceau.ca. And my big work, I guess, coming out is actually my first collection. It's called Palimpsest. It is available as of March 16th from Ghost Orchid Press. It's currently available for pre-order for Kindle on Amazon. And paperbacks are available through the Ghost Orchid Press store, the web store. But it will be available in paperback on Amazon as well as it's released on March 16th. And if you can't wait to get your hands on a copy of that, I will also be out in the January, early February. It's one of the two. I think it's early February issue of Phantasmagoria magazine. So you can find me.
Awesome. All right. I will have everything linked down below in the show notes for you to follow. So be sure you do that. Like I said, thank you again for being on board. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I had a blast. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So until next time, we will see you then.
Bye.
Bye.